Good morning. We're glad you've joined us for the Sunday morning service of Tusculum Hills Baptist Church, a caring and vibrant church that offers God's help to all people. We invite you to join us now for a special message from God's Word from Pastor Paul Gunn.
The title of my message today is The Cupbearer and the Baker. I will be preaching from Genesis chapter 40. Here are the 3 points to my sermon today. First, Joseph was kind. Second, Joseph was honest. And third, Joseph was forgotten. So you probably thought I was going to preach on character traits of Joseph, saying that he was kind and that he was honest, but we have this terrible situation in the end of the message today that Joseph was forgotten. And for those of you who know Joseph's story, we know that it doesn't end with him at the end of this sermon today. Last week, you learned about Joseph and Potiphar's wife and about how Joseph avoided the temptation that was right in front of him, and then he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and he was put in jail. So here's this wonderful man, as best as we know from the Scripture. He was a man of strong character, sold into slavery by his brothers, hated by his brothers, and now he finds himself here in Egypt in jail. He probably wondered many times, what did I do to ever cause this to happen to me, to deserve this? What did I do? But Joseph was an interesting man. We can learn a lot from the life of Joseph, and we will this morning as well. Read with me the first 8 verses, Genesis chapter 40, verses 1 through 8. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the 2 men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Verse 6, when Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were in custody with him in his master's house, why do you look so sad today? We both had dreams, they answered, but there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Well, the cupbearer was a servant who presented Pharaoh with his drinks. So the word cupbearer is a literal name and title of the action that this person performed. Can you imagine that being your job? He was probably the official taster for things as well. If someone wanted to get poison to the Pharaoh and poison him, the cupbearer would discover it the hard way. He would get sick or he would die first, and Pharaoh would know that something was wrong. The baker, of course, would have been in charge of making much of the Pharaoh's food, if not all of it. We have no way of knowing what happened to cause Pharaoh to be displeased with these 2 men, but suffice it to say, they were on his bad side. Now, we don't know if our president or other leaders of other countries have cupbearers who taste the food in advance, but my guess is they probably do. And we know that our president has a complete kitchen staff. I'm sure that other countries' leaders have the same thing as well. And a lot of times those leaders get to know the people in those kitchen staffs quite well. So I assume it was the same in ancient times. Pharaoh probably knew the baker, knew the cupbearer quite well, but they made him angry for some reason, and he had them put in jail. They were put in jail where Joseph was, and being kept with him was another indication of God's provision in Joseph's life. Joseph didn't want to be in jail. The cupbearer, the baker, they didn't want to be in jail. But God was up to something. Thank you so much for the music this morning. That just really opened up the door here for this message. Not only did Potiphar want to kill Joseph for his supposed transgressions, he put him in jail where the most important criminals were kept. So Potiphar was under the Pharaoh, and Potiphar was held a political office. And we know the story with his wife, Potiphar's wife, and such. So here Joseph finds himself in jail with important people. But in jail, they weren't very important, were they? They were just all equals. And although Joseph was a prisoner himself, the two prisoners fell under his supervision. Again, we see Joseph's character demonstrated in this story. When the cupbearer and the baker were downcast, Joseph noticed the differences in their demeanor and asked what was troubling them. Now, you know, Joseph didn't have to ask what was wrong with them. He didn't have to have any type of pastor's heart. He didn't have to have any type of shepherd's heart in jail. But this is just who Joseph was. Joseph cared for the people around him, including his fellow prisoners. Well, there was a woman named Bonnie, and she was arguing with her elderly mother. And unfortunately, their exchange got heated, and Bonnie raised her voice at her elderly mother. And a few seconds later, Bonnie's young granddaughter came between the two women. So Bonnie's young granddaughter came between her, the grandmother, and Bonnie's mother, the great-grandmother of the little girl. And so she took her grandmother Bonnie's face into her hands and said, "Stop it, Nanny, you need to be nice." Then she turned to her great-grandmother and said, "It's okay, Ma, I've always loved you." You know, being nice all the time is not easy, is it? And I'm sure the two women loved each other, but the youngest in the group thought that there was some friction and that one did not like the other. You know, Joseph could have moped around whining and complaining about the injustices in his life. Have you ever met somebody who did that? When you ask them how they're doing, you realize, oh, I should not have asked that. Because you hear the rundown. I see some of you nodding out there. You know what I'm talking about. It gets to, with some people, you get to where you don't say, "How are you doing?" You just say, "Hello." Because they'll go back in time and start revisiting all the injustices, whether they're real or perceived, and they'll bring you up to date on the latest injustice in their life. Well, Joseph could have done that. He could have done that while he was in jail, but he didn't. He could have curled up in a corner. He could have cried himself to sleep. He could have just worried about himself and no one else. He could have lashed out at the two newcomers, giving them a piece of his mind and bringing them up to date on his injustices committed toward him. After all, he had no obligation to any of the people there. He wasn't even a part of them. He wasn't blood kin to them in any way. He was a foreigner in their jail. But he extended kindness. And he noticed that there were two men that were troubled, and he asked what was bothering them. You know, as Christians, we are called to live in community with each other. Our faith is not one of isolation. And I constantly wonder when somebody tells me, "Well, we just have church at home. We just worship the Lord at home." And they're like Christian lone wolves, you know, out here by themselves. As I understand the Scripture, the Christian life, the life of faith, is to be lived out in community. Well, Joseph knew that, and he was a man of faith himself, and his kindness was drawing other people to his faith, even though he might not have even realized that, even though the baker and the cupbearer did not realize that. Even before Joseph had any access to Scripture, because we're just in Genesis 40, so he didn't have any access to Scripture. So Joseph demonstrated concern for his fellow human beings. We should too. We see the character trait of Joseph as kindness in the worst of circumstances. Next, we see that Joseph was honest. Genesis chapter 40, beginning with verse 9, going through 19. A bit of scripture here, so follow along with me. Genesis chapter 40, verse 9, going through 19. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Verse 18, "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Wow. 2 dreams, 2 different interpretations. Heavy, heavy duty stuff here. Well, we see that Joseph did talk about his injustice, and he brought it up at a time, at the right time, when the cupbearer was eager to hear. And he said, "When you leave the jail in 3 days, please remember me." And during this time and in this culture, people put a lot of stock in dreams. Now, last night, I dreamed about a big house with a really large basement where I could have a section of each part of the basement to do all my hobbies. You know, I don't think that was a word from God. I think I was thinking about something before I went to sleep and dreamed about this big basement. Then I woke up to my small house. You know, the big basement is not there. So in this day, though, it was very different. God did speak to people through dreams. I do believe God can speak to people through dreams today. In fact, a friend of mine just, let's see, what day was it? Friday. A friend of mine Friday was talking to me on the phone. He had just gotten back from a trip to Poland to encourage Christians there who were receiving Ukrainians by the thousands and helping them, and also to encourage the Polish people who have a lot of reason to have fear right now. And he told me that, as crazy as it may sound, we need to ask Christians to pray that God will reveal himself through dreams to the Muslim people. Because this is how the Muslim people, many of them come to faith in Christ, because God reveals himself through a dream. And we need to pray about that, even though, of course, in our culture, we don't tend to think of God speaking to us through dreams until one hits pretty hard and we feel that it's some type of impression from the Lord. Most of the people of this day in all parts of the known world believe that gods, lower G-O-D-S, communicated with humans through dreams. The Egyptians and other people groups actually wrote books on how to interpret dreams. And kings and pharaohs and important rulers often had professional dream interpreters, also called diviners or wise men. What if you had a job interpreting dreams? Had the cupbearer and baker not been in jail, they probably would have sought the advice of such men. But because God often used dreams to communicate to his people, Joseph was also aware of their importance. And remember, Joseph had had a few dreams himself. And he shared those dreams with his brothers, which made them angry at him. And as a worshiper of the one true God, Joseph understood that if a dream had meaning, if there was a message from God, that only God could accurately interpret the message. Now, let's just look at it this way. This is the best way for me to say it, even though it's oversimplified, but I believe accurate. I do believe that God spoke to people differently in this day than he does in our day today. We have his word, which Joseph did not have. We have his word, which all the people did not have. And so God chose to speak to people in a unique way. One of those ways was through dreams. And while he can speak to us through dreams today, it's probably because he can't get our attention in any other way. He's already revealed himself to us through his word. Well, the baker did not seem willing to share his dream until after Joseph gave a favorable interpretation of the cupbearer's dream. The baker probably had this sinking feeling that the dream was not going to have any good prediction. And still, when he heard Joseph give the cupbearers good news, he jumped in and told Joseph his dream as well. I want you to listen to this. After a young mother dropped one of her children off at gymnastics, her little girl, she took her son with her to run errands. And as she was driving down the road, she heard her young son shout, "Mom, sister hit me." And of course, the mom was a little taken aback because she knew no one else was in the car. And she said, "Your sister could not have hit you. She's not even in the car." And the little boy said, "Oh, I forgot." Honesty does not always come easy. Does it come easy for children? It does not come easy for adults. Joseph could have lied. After all, these were two very important men. Joseph made it clear to the cupbearer that he wanted his help when he got out. Surely, he did not want to make the baker mad, but he needed to be faithful to the interpretation that God's Spirit gave him to tell the baker what was about to happen. And even though Joseph knew the truth, he may have thought, what difference would it make to give the baker bad news? Why not just tell him something to appease him? But Joseph had too much integrity for that sort of thing. Now, a little aside here that's not really connected with the message, but it's just a thought that I have that I want to share with you about this. This is such a powerful story of a man's dream being interpreted. In 3 days, you're going to die. I mean, we all want to go to heaven. Nobody wants to die. But to be told in 3 days you're going to die, for the baker to hear that, I wonder what the baker did during those 3 days. If you were told by someone today, you will die in 3 days, what would you do? That would be room for repentance, wouldn't it? It would be room for getting things right with other people. It would be room for praying and saying, "God, what do you want from me in the next 3 days?" And of course, we see times in Scripture where God changed his mind. Can God change his mind? He can if he wants to. And even though we don't understand the sovereignty of God, and it's best for us just to say the sovereignty of God is something that on this side we cannot understand, and on the other side in eternity someday we will not be able to understand the sovereignty of God. We hear arguments, discussions about this all the time with little weak human models of people trying to understand the sovereignty of God and breaking it down into some type of little formula. Hey, listen, folks, God's ways and his minds are way above our ways and minds. We can't figure out God. So we need to quit trying. We accept what God says. We may question what God says, but we see times in Scripture where God changed his mind. So it's very possible here that had the baker used those 3 days to repent, to confess, to seek God in the best way he knew how, even though his knowledge would have been somewhat limited, even to ask Joseph to help him connect with God, God could have very well changed his mind. But he didn't. Still, Joseph could have easily told the baker good news. Don't we want to tell people good news? Who wants to deliver the bad news? Nobody. Have you ever been in a situation where it seemed better to lie? Maybe you were in a complicated situation and to explain the truth would have taken too long. I know a man who knows a man who was in a meeting with Donald Trump. And he said, President Trump only wanted to hear good news. If you told him the truth and it wasn't good news, you'd be out of the office, just the way he was. But nobody wants to share bad news. Maybe you decided to simplify your tax return by not reporting a bunch of information. Did I hear somebody chuckle there? Well, if there's a time when you decided if it was better to lie, did you wonder who it would hurt? Did you question whether it would be okay to fudge the truth just a little bit? Joseph was a godly man. And even when it was difficult, he told the truth. So we see that Joseph was kind. We see that he was honest. We also see that Joseph was forgotten. Genesis chapter 40, verses 20 through 23. Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that once again he could put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker just as Joseph had said to him in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Well, shame on the cupbearer. But that's the way it happened. It all came true. 3 days later, Pharaoh was celebrating his birthday, and he called for the cupbearer and the baker to be brought into his presence. Maybe there had been an investigation. We can easily imply that. Possibly that's true. And he had discovered the innocence of one and the guilt of the other. We don't know. Maybe he was just in a festive mood and wanted to flaunt his power, as kings of that day did quite often. For whatever reason, Pharaoh pardoned one and he punished the other. The cupbearer was restored to his position and the baker died. And unfortunately, the cupbearer quickly forgot the whole painful ordeal, including Joseph and his kindness. It's easy to forget. Sometimes things just slip our minds. Other times, we have to work hard to forget. And I'm sure that Joseph did not think that the cupbearer's forgetfulness was any laughing matter. Can you imagine how hopeful Joseph was that the day that the cupbearer was released from jail? Just think about how he must have waited, expecting any day to hear the news that he would be released, but it never came. The cupbearer forgot. Don't be the cupbearer. Remember those who have helped you. Remember those who've spoken a good word to you. Remember those who've gone out of their way to help you get from point A to point B. Don't forget those people. One of our international families has a wife and mother who is caring for too many people. I don't think anybody here knows who this person is, but our international workers here at church do. She has kids of her own, plus a husband, but for some reason the extended family thinks that they can just drop people off at her home to care for. At one time, about a year and a half ago, this young mother of 5 children was caring for 3 handicapped people, not even direct kin of hers, plus her family, her 5 kids, her husband, and others. One night, there were 14 people in her home. And she was expected to do laundry and cook and care for all these people, 3 of them handicapped. 3 of them so handicapped that they just can't do anything for themselves. Now, over time, there were less people in the home, and I even spoke up and said, there's too many people in this home. You all need to quit treating this woman like a slave. And I used the word slave because I believe that's what it was. So 2 of the handicapped people were taken to be cared for by family members. They went to another state, and then things kind of settled down in that home. And I remember thinking, I need to remember this and not let it happen again. Well, recently someone went to get the 2 handicapped men and bring them back to the home. Of course, listen, I want to be real clear here. Someone has to care for these men, but the immediate family is not caring for the men. They are dumping these 2 men. I say dumping because that's what they did without her permission in her home. So I had to get involved. I did not forget the burden that she had been under. And I spoke up, and I was very strong. Some of the extended family's not very happy with me because I spoke up. But I didn't forget in that case. There's been other times when I'm sure I've forgotten things that I decided that I did not want to forget. It's easy to forget, but as a Christian community of faith, God expects us to be kind to one another, to look out for one another, to pay attention to the needs of our fellow brothers and sisters, and to help them when we can, and to not forget to follow through on our good intentions. Don't we have lots of good intentions that we don't follow through on? It'd be better to have less good intentions and follow through on them than to have a bunch and never follow through on any of them. God wants us to be people of integrity like Joseph, to live upright, moral lives, and to be honest even when it hurts. Unfortunately, that does not mean we will be treated the same. Such was the case with Joseph. Just as Joseph was quickly forgotten, there are times in our lives when we feel that the very people we have helped have turned their backs on us. What do? How are we supposed to respond? Jesus said that we should turn the other cheek, and as counterintuitive as it is, we should love each other regardless of whether or not others love us. The cupbearer may have forgotten Joseph, but God did not forget Joseph. The cupbearer missed out on the blessing of bringing Joseph out of prison, but God rose up other people to share in that blessing. God will never forget us. He will never forsake us. He will never, ever leave us. You know, Joseph offers this model of how we should behave when things do not go our way. As a Christian, how are you doing in that area? Are you modeling the character traits of Christ to people in your life? We're going to have the altar open this morning, a time of prayer. If you want to come and pray about something, and if you do not know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, if you do not have a personal relationship with Him, I invite you to come forward today so that we can talk about it.